Hi there. Welcome back to the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles. Last time we wrapped up things with Kazuma and had a nice chat with Mikotoba about quite a few things. About the Reaper, about Chigoko, about, well, his offer for me to leave London and go back to Japan, which, I'm quite curious. I'm wondering how that's going to play out for everyone. Or, I mean, and Ryunosuke as well, but, you know. Because, I mean, it was assumed, I figured it was assumed that we weren't going to be staying in London forever, but, you know, we didn't really have an end goal, so, who knows? But now, let's see, where to go? Okay, so we've done here, we were in prison, Fresno Street Room, the cracked scene of the crime, mind you, and Mr. Vigil's hospital bed. Okay, well these are the two new places to go, and I guess it's time for us to actually go see Mr. Vigil, because Susato's dialogue updated. But we never actually did go back to review the scene of the crime, so well, there might be something new here. Oh. Or maybe not? Okay, well some of this stuff has been checked through, but not all of it. I mean, the fact there was no new dialogue at all makes me wonder. But, okay, fine. Well, let's just quickly examine the new information. Or the new, stuff that's highlighted. The photograph of Mrs. Vigil. Realizing the identity of this lady was a very great clue to exposing Mr. Gossip's true identity. He obviously loves his wife very dearly. Yep, he's definitely a wife guy. Which is why he felt he couldn't tell her the truth. The transformation was incredible, wasn't it? Just from that big, gross, twisted lip. Yes, he went to extraordinary efforts to play the part of Hugh Boone convincingly. And he should get a fucking second career as a disguise artist, because, I mean, he was, you know, he was obviously himself. He also disguised himself as an entirely different person, and also apparently impersonated Tobias Gregson, so clearly he's got a talent for disguise. Although, it didn't really seem like it was much of an effort to me. Now you say it, I have to agree. It's almost as if that was Mr. Vigil's true character. What, was that like his persona, or whatever? People really are hard to fathom at times. Or I guess I just mean that, like, you know, without having his inhibitions, you know, that's the kind of person he would be, I guess. There are details of cases stretching back over 10 years on this notice board. Yes, a history of Lord Van Zeek's defeats in court. I don't think that's an appropriate description. Although, when you consider everything on the board, it's certainly true that all these people had a background of dubious dealings. And in the end, of course, the board itself concealed the inspector's own death. Oh my. It really doesn't bear thinking about. Isn't it ironic? You really do think. So, also, I'm wondering, like, where's Gina? I haven't seen her all day either. And she can't be in the best of spirits, you know, considering everything. If it turns out that Gregson didn't actually die here at all, where on earth could he have been killed? Well, one way or another, we must find out, for the inspector's sake. You know, you look awfully pale again today, Mr. Naruhodo. Sorry. When I start thinking it all through, I conjure up some horrible images in my mind. Your imagination is the culprit here, then. Most certainly guilty. Poor Naruhodo. I'd never have imagined that this little figurine would turn out to be a watch-winding key. I suppose it's policeman because the pocket watch was a gift from Scotland Yard. It seems there was much more to Inspector Gregson than we ever realized. He was clearly a brilliant man. It's the fish and chips that threw us off. I feel as though it ruined his image. I really don't think we should blame one of Britain's staple cuisines. But think about it. Imagine if it was Mr. Sholmes. How would you feel if instead of that old briar pipe that always in his hand, Mr. Sholmes had a bag of chips? Yeah, I feel like it, would take something away. Rather disappointed, if I'm honest. Exactly. This revolver, just who does it belong to? Well, we know it's of the type issued to members of the police force and judiciary. But Gregson's own gun was found on his person. And of course, Lord Van Zykes has admitted to losing the firearm with which he was issued, which seems awfully convenient, but, you know. Subchaptered-mindedness. Not dissimilar to you, Mr. Naruhodo. Hey, don't go bringing me into this. I don't even have a gun. I'm starting to think that the cold, hard prosecutor and I could become friends after all. Then I wish you every success. I don't know if I want to be friends with that guy. He's still a bit of a meanie. Using a candle as a timer device. Very ingenious, I must say. Yes. The culprit arranged it so that the firecracker would be set off at 5 o'clock and then left. So that a loud bang was heard at precisely the moment that Lord Van Zykes arrived, yes. If only he hadn't picked up that gun from the floor. Something you probably told yourself once upon a time, I imagine. Yeah. Yes, I've learned that lesson by bitter experience. I would have turned and run a mile for sure. Which may not have done you any favors either. Yeah, the one lesson everyone needs to learn. Don't fucking pick up the gun. If there's ever a murder going on, just stay away from the gun. You have to lift it. Well, okay. Clearly we didn't learn anything of use. Just more flavor text, which, you know, isn't bad. But hey, now we can go pay Mr. Vigil a visit while we're at it. See how he's holding up. This is the ward where Mr. Vigil was brought, apparently. To be frank, I'm a little worried about seeing him again. Howdy. How's it going? Ah, the lawyer. Hello again. Are you feeling better now, Mr. Vigil? Yes, thank you. Somewhat better. I'm so sorry to have caused you to, I mean, it was because of me. If I hadn't exposed your secret and forced you to remember things that you'd obviously try to forget. The prosecutor was here until a few moments ago, too. You just missed him. Oh! Kazuma beat us to it. He said much the same as you. He was very apologetic. But the truth is, I brought all this upon myself. Please, don't think like that. Keeping it from Evie, my wife, all these years, have carried such a sense of guilt. But that's not the worst of it. Over time, I obviously came to deceive myself as well. And I still don't know what to make of those like weird like Vogue poses he likes to do. You mean about your dismissal? Looking back now, I'm beginning to think that perhaps Inspector Gregson didn't stumble across me by accident at all. I mean, he compensated me so generously for acting as a stand-in. He was clearly concerned for my well-being and doing what he could to help. Yeah, that's one way to think about it. So perhaps Gregson knew exactly what had become of Mr. Vigil all along then. I'm sure this is just desserts for 10 years of lies and deception, but... It wasn't me that helped the Professor escape 10 years ago! It wasn't me! I swear it! I swear it's true! Oh, Mr. Vigil? I'm sure you'd rather not dredge up even more from your past at this time, but... If possible, could you tell us exactly what really happened? I want to. I need to get all this off my chest. I just want someone to tell me what I should have done. Clearly he's still, having a bit of a rough go of things. Well, I mean, we technically have been in this, like, area before, but... I don't know, maybe there'll be something, of interest. This notice caught my eye before, actually. I suppose it's some sort of slogan for the ward. A cheerful welcome message, perhaps. Let's see... Pay with good cheer, leave with good cheer. Well, look at that! You were spot on, Mrs. Otto. It is full of cheer. Wonder how many discharged patients pay their medical bills with good cheer, though. Once I had to have a very painful injection when I fell ill with a cold. I felt awful already. So why did I have to suffer the sting of the injection as well as the pill? I yelled at the doctor. Oh dear. What terrible treatment. Yeah, I do remember that, that exploit you told us about during your first case, and why you apparently hate doctors. These must be the patient's treatment notes. Let's see. Tendency to jump from windows. Remember to place cushion at base of wall outside. Okay, well, that doesn't seem to be in very good taste. And besides, placing a cushion at the base of the window, at the wall outside, would not have exactly helped anything, now would it? Also, the way the windows are opened, I don't think he could jump out the window even if he tried. Aren't we a story up from the ground here? Oh dear. Poor Mr. Vigil. I can't help feeling that there's a better solution to the problem than a cushion, though. Finding something you've lost isn't always a happy experience, it turns out. Pursuing the truth can be a very dark business sometimes, can't it? Yes, I'm afraid it can. Yeah, that's... We've learned that to be true from various experiences. There are all sorts of medicines in this cabinet. Look! I'm not sure if it's safe leaving them in reach of everyone like this. Yes, you're right. I can imagine if you were peckish, you might try some of the pills. Well, at least there seems to be a little lock to secure the cabinet doors. I don't imagine that would stop you if you were hungry. I worry that you'd break the lock. Hunger doesn't turn me into a criminal, you know, Mrs. Otto. I mean, there was that time that you said that you whenever you're prescribed medicine, you just take it all at once, you know, so... I mean, I wouldn't put it past you, my guy. Ah, patient treatment notes. What do these say, I wonder? Endlessly obliging. I suppose that's referring to the patient in this bed. I would think so. And until Mr. Vigil is a little more stable, it's probably just as well that he has a kindly person in the neighboring bed. The endlessly part is a little worrying, though, isn't it? I mean, what if Mr. Vigil suddenly declared that he'd like to take a trip out of the window? Would this endlessly obliging patient simply open it for him and say, "Be my guest"? Well, again, the windows open up, they open at the front. Like, they don't open from the bottom, from what I can tell. So, I'm pretty sure old Vigil can't fit in that relatively small window. Let's check with the doctor later. Ah, look! A pair of crutches. Before we came to Britain, I hadn't realized that they were used here as well. I imagine they were imported into Japan from Great Britain in the first place. Ah, so no one in all of Japan broke a leg before their arrival. Well, anyway, the sight of these things doesn't bring back good memories for me. Oh dear! Did you injure yourself once and need to use some? When I was little, I thought they looked fun, so I borrowed a pair to play with. But then I slipped, and I sprained my ankle. Oh. You kind of used crutches in the opposite way they were intended. I see. They contain powerful magic, those wooden staffs. The power to heal, and the power to harm. I mean... Okay, well, for all your growth, Ryunosuke, you're still a bit of a silly Billy, aren't you? I think a certain cheeky little boy managed to cause a harm all by himself. Yeah, that sounds about right. Silly Ryunosuke. There are lots of bottles in that cabinet there, aren't there? Do you think it's safe to keep them there? If you were a patient here, I feel sure you take some medicine by mistake when you were half asleep. That is a worry. But at least the cabinet has a lock. Even if it's only a flimsy-looking one. Oh, I've no doubt you'd manage to unlock that somehow while you were half asleep as well. There are limits even to what I can do when I'm half asleep, Mr. Sato. Ah, they're such a fun pair. Now, let's get to pressing. Inspector Gregson was obviously engaged in a special operation of some sort. He was investigating something that even Scotland Yard couldn't know about. Details of the Reaper's marks, yes. It was when he had to carry out those investigations that I would take his identifications and impersonate him. He would pretend to be the inspector and carry out investigations on his behalf. Oh, but... Oh no, never! A common street peddler couldn't possibly carry out a proper police investigation. All I would do is go to the specified location and make a little hoo-ha. Just something to leave an impression, so everyone there would think a detective called Gregson was here. So, that's what you were doing on the day prior to the incident. Yes. He asked me to make an appearance at the park on Lime Street for the Red-Headed League event. So as usual, I flashed the inspector's identification around and was very vocal about my presence. Iris and... Jeez, again, you just kind of show up. But then you were taken prisoner by those red-headed fraudsters. Yes. So... you would always make a point of showing Gregson's identification, and generally being loud. That's what the inspector asked me to do, yes. Well, that's one way of becoming a legendary detective, I suppose. Not a good one, though. And as you know, I suffered this bruising around my neck at their hands. Oh yeah, their kinky, chain BDSM play. But the following day, they kept their word and released me. Without returning the inspector's identification to you, however. We had arranged to meet in the Fresno Street room at 5 that day, so I could report back to the inspector. But, at the agreed time, that's when I heard the gunshot. So it would seem. It was at midnight on the 17th of June, 10 years ago. That was the time scheduled for the execution. But the professor's execution never actually took place, did it? Or rather, the execution itself must have been used to affect the plan of escape. I hardly dare to imagine what a chilling plan it was. Barclay was renowned for being the highest security prison in the country. Everything that went in or out of the place was searched multiple times. But there was one notable exception. Or rather, one notable loophole. Something that was never questioned. I have a feeling I know what that loophole was now. The coffins into which the bodies of the executed convicts were placed. Correct. Yes. Once the coroner had confirmed the death of a condemned convict, the body was taken in its coffin for immediate burial in Lowgate Cemetery, just beyond the prison. The chief warder first had to sign the necessary papers. And after that, no member of staff was permitted to touch the coffin containing the body again. When executions took place, only the executioner and the coroner were permitted inside the chamber. I would wait in the adjacent room for word that the condemned convict was dead. On that occasion, once I had that confirmation, I went into the mortuary to find a lone coffin as usual. The procedure was that I would sign the paperwork, having checked the coffin, and then nail it shut. But for some reason that day, the coffin was already nailed shut. No! I didn't think anything of it at the time. I assumed that my deputy must have checked the coffin and nailed it shut before I arrived. So, you mean the coffin contained? Yes. I can only imagine that Asogi, having escaped his execution somehow, was alive inside the coffin. The coffin was then taken out to the main gates and deposited in Lowgate Cemetery. Man, so he was buried alive then. Man, that part must have not been pleasant. Presumably there wouldn't have been enough air inside to breathe for long. So in the early hours following the burial, somebody dug up the coffin again to set Genshin free. But in the end, he was fatally shot in the graveyard anyway. What on earth really happened in Lowgate Cemetery that night, I wonder? Yeah, I mean, having a plan, like basically faking your death so that you would be, buried alive and then, upheaved, I believe is the word, only to be shot again for realsies. It's a strange series of events. I'm afraid I really don't know. All I can say with certainty are two things. Asogi couldn't possibly escape that way without help from somebody working in the prison. And that somebody was not me. So you didn't actually help him, even though you signed the papers. But if it wasn't you, who else could it have been? Obviously, you knew the man then. The professor, I mean. Genshin Asogi. Yes, I remember him well, in fact. Would you mind telling us what you know? Well, having been condemned to death as he was, any contact I had with the man was short, obviously. After that trial, which was carried out behind closed doors, attended only by elite members of the judiciary, they called for his execution to be carried out at the earliest possible opportunity. The outcome of the trial was set from the beginning, wasn't it? The game was rigged from the start. It was a time of delicate diplomacy, when Britain and Japan were in the process of signing an important treaty. That meant that this potentially destabilizing case had to be dealt with swiftly and discreetly. The man had less than a week in total. As I was the chief warder, I oversaw his short stay in the cells until his final hour. I remember being struck deeply by his noble character and incredible resilience. What do you mean, exactly? He was a killer of many men, but he was always quiet and polite. He was a gentleman and a man of intellect. In fact, I couldn't bring myself to believe what he'd done. So I asked him one day. Those 5 members of the aristocracy, whose lives were taken, sorry. Were you really responsible? I'm guilty of the unforgivable crime of ending another. Well, that's Genshin's voice, isn't it? So I wouldn't even know what kind of voice he would get. I'm guilty of the unforgivable crime of ending another human's life. Yes. Well, that's definitely a specific way of putting it. The following day, the closed trial took place, and the verdict was no surprise. Guilty. That night, when he was brought back to his cell, I saw something. Something unusual. Something unusual? What? The last will and testament of Genshin Asogi. I mean, is that really unusual? You know, don't people? I mean, I feel like people who are dying or about to die do have wills normally. But yeah, fair enough. Care to elaborate? As I said, it was on the night following his trial, after he'd been found guilty. I was doing the rounds in the cells, and when I looked into Asogi's, I noticed that he seemed to have a sheet of paper in his hand. Ah! His last will and testament then, presumably. As soon as he noticed me, he hurriedly shoved it behind his back. But why did you find that so unusual? Isn't it normal for a man to pin a will when he knows his death is nigh? Yeah, that's what it seems. Cesaro had the same thought. Yes, that's true, but there were special conditions to Asogi's incarceration, you see. What sort of conditions? Well, even though he was held in a cell designed for condemned inmates, he was allowed to keep his personal effects with him, with one exception. Really? He was allowed his things? That is unusual, certainly. Of course, he'd been convicted of killing 5 members of the aristocracy, but at the same time, he was a guest in our country from the Empire of Japan. The powers that be were determined that his final days shouldn't be needlessly uncomfortable. I see. And what was the exception you had mentioned to the personal effects he was allowed? That's the point. He wasn't permitted to have writing materials. Oh. Specifically, no pens or paper. That's weird. I mean, of all the things to not have, pens or paper, that kind of seems like... that is unusual. So, he was prevented from leaving any written record of what had happened to him. Yes, that was the long and short of it. I have no idea where he obtained that paper. Any writing materials would have been confiscated from him upon his incarceration. As I said, he hid the paper behind his back, and then he pleaded with me. What did you just hide behind your back? Please. Please. Turn a blind eye. This is my lifeline. But you know it's against the rules. You're the only person who's seen. If you just agree to keep quiet. Alright then. But what's on that paper? The last will and testament. This will is the only weapon I have left now. The only weapon I have left? Huh. How could a will be a weapon? So, I decided to pretend I'd seen nothing. And I let him keep his will. But then later, it just seemed to vanish without trace. What? What do you mean it vanished? It would seem that isn't the end of the story of this mysterious will. Huh. Well, that's definitely suspicious. I was the only person who saw Asugi's will. I mean, then again, if he knew he was going to die, like, what was he going to do with the will anyway? But somehow it disappeared. It was after Asugi's execution. Which was actually an elaborate jailbreak. The warders gathered up Asugi's possessions that were in his cell. They were all to be sent back to his family home in Japan, you see. To poor Kazuma-sama. And you're saying that it wasn't anywhere to be found among his personal effects? The will, I mean. That's right. Though, I didn't search through them myself. But Governor Kaden was livid. He was screaming. It cannot have disappeared completely. That doesn't quite make sense, though, does it? In what way? I mean, if Asugi, well, if Vigil was the only one who knew, then why would they have noticed that something was gone? Yeah, see, exactly. Well, we'd understood that only Mr. Vigil was aware of the will's existence. In which case, how did the prison governor know to look for it? Oh yes, you're right. I really don't know how he knew. But it certainly seemed as though he knew of the will's existence from the outset. Only he didn't refer to it as a will. What he said was the Asugi papers. The Asugi papers? I really can't tell you anything of the subsequent events. Because, well, of what happened. Your dismissal, and the way you blocked it all from your memory. I'd forgotten all this until today. I don't suppose it's relevant to the case, though. Well, anyway, thank you very much for sharing it with us, Mr. Vigil. We're very grateful. Yeah, it's definitely nice to have some, more information about the events back then. Even though there's still more questions and answers. Like, again, if Vigil wasn't the one who helped him escape, or, helped fake his execution, then who the hell was? I'm afraid there's really little more I can tell you. My wife Evie will be here shortly. So I do hope I don't appear rude, but... No, not at all. Thank you again. But what will become of you now? Well, impersonating a police officer is a criminal offense, of course. I imagine that once I'm fully recovered, I shall be arrested. Ah, that's unfortunate. I mean, you're definitely not a bad guy. Plus, I mean, is it really a crime if the one who told you to do it was the cops? I mean, that's almost like entrapment or something, right? I'm so sorry. Don't be, please. This was all my own doing. I always knew that this day would come. Well, I wish you well. Goodbye, Mr. Vigil. Ah! Oh, Christ. You jump scared me. Like, I know I said ah, but that was like partially my reaction as well as what he literally said. Before you go, there's just one thing. Yes? What is it? The TGAAC papers. I'd be very grateful if you'd make no mention of the things I told you about them. Presumably for some good reason. It's my understanding that their very existence is a closely guarded secret. If it became known that I'd remembered... Oh yeah, that would kind of put you in a bad place, wouldn't it? Well, it could be rather troublesome, I think. I understand. Some sort of will that TGAAC penned just before his death, which the man himself claimed was his last weapon. I wonder, perhaps it had something to do with his plan to escape. If there's anyone who might know more about a document that Cosmo's father left behind, it would be Mr. Vigil's governor! And we know precisely where we must go. Back to Barclay Prison. Man. Poor Mr. Vigil. He doesn't seem to be doing too hot. Well, at least he seems to be on the mend. You know, his disguise as Mr. Gossip was really quite masterful, wasn't it? I can't remember anything about it except for the floppy lip. I imagine not even his wife would have recognized him. Perhaps. But did he really have to take it quite so far? Perhaps not. But perhaps he did. Who knows? Anyway, well now we have another place to check out on top of, you know, everything else. So we see, we have the laboratory, I guess, and now we have to go back to the prison governor's office to chat with old Barry Caden and see what he's got on his plate. But we can do all that in the next episode. Until then, though, I'll see you around.